everyone, this is a quick little synopsis of our time in the NICU. I was totally not prepared for the NICU at all. I don't think anybody really is, unless you know that like you have to deliver your baby at like 30 weeks, 32 weeks, something like that. But this, or if you have multiples, I guess you might be expecting to go to the NICU. Baby boy is grunting, so I might have to get him. But this is my experience a week in the NICU with a full-term baby. So I'm going to start this video by saying if you haven't watched my birth story, you should probably go and watch that because it's very long, complicated, traumatic, etc. And it is why we ended up in the NICU. So synopsis is long labor induced because of cholestasis. He came out, shoulder dystocia, which is where his head couldn't descend past my pubic bone really, or shoulder I mean. He was stuck, and then he had his cord wrapped around his neck a couple times, which caused him to have oxygen deprivation, which sent him to the NICU like straight away because his APGAR was like 1 when he came out. So this is my experience. So first, all the labor happened, delivery happened, and my husband, well, first the pediatric team was already in there because they knew something was wrong, so they were already there ready to prep to go. And so my husband was there standing at the little incubator ready to go with him to the NICU because they knew he would have to be whisked right away because he was not breathing on his own for, I think it was a minute and a half, and they had him intubated for 7 minutes. They were like doing the breaths for him for at least 7 minutes, and then they had like the breathing tube in after that. So he went to the NICU right away. I think he was gone for, well, he was there, my husband was there for almost 2 hours. Or an hour and a half with him. They made the decision an hour after he was born to put him on the cooling pad because of the oxygen deprivation. So you can look it up, and I'll try to link some good studies below or like an article about it. But the cooling pad basically tries to negate any further damage from oxygen deprivation. So he had a lot of excess CO2 build up in his brain from being oxygen deprived, and so by cooling him down, it gives his body a chance to try to get rid of the excess CO2, not have to worry about working on other things like metabolism, etc., and give his brain a chance to really heal. So he's cooling, which is literally they make him cold for 72 hours. They didn't notice in studies that any more than 72 hours was beneficial, and I think any less was not as beneficial as at least 72 hours. So 94 degrees for 72 hours, no incubator, which is what you think of the NICU. You think of babies being warm and trying to bundle them. No, naked, except for a diaper, and shivering for 3 days. So I finally got to go see him. He was born at 9:13. I finally got to see him about 1:30 in the morning after I had been in labor and delivery for about 2 hours and then transferred to mother baby. And we had to wait for them to be done working on him, really. So they were, after 2 hours, my husband came back to the room with me without the baby and with one of the nurse practitioners, and she kind of explained what was going on and the whole thing that I just told you about the cooling. And one of the OB, or one of the family medicine doctors, came in and started talking to me prior to that just to give me a heads up. She's the one who actually delivered the baby, like pulled him out, and she knew about his cord, and she knew that his arm was stuck and that there might have been damage from her helping to actually extract him from me. So, because he did have the vacuum assist as well because he was stuck. He was sunny side up too. I cannot believe I forgot to say that in my labor and delivery, which was huge, because it was why it was so painful and hard for him to send, and yeah. So 1:30 in the morning, we finally got to see him. I must have had mommy blinders on because when I look back at pictures, he was so blue. He was blue from being oxygen deprived, and he was already cooling, but he was very blue. When he came out, I don't remember him being that blue, but my husband does. But he just looks like he was like not breathing for a while. His lips were blue, his skin just had this hue of blue. So got in there, got to see him, got to kiss him, got to touch him. He was hooked up to like everything imaginable. Breathing tube, nasal tube, which was the temperature probe. They were starting to do an EEG for brain activity to monitor for seizures. He had an IV, he had in his umbilical cord. They ran 3 lines, I think, to take blood and something else, but like it's less painful than the PICC line because it's more easy to access and they can't feel the umbilical cord. So he had things in his belly button. He had to go have a cranial x-ray, I think, and then something, another, like a chest CT or something, yes, to check for, I think, to see if anything was broken from being stuck. So there's all that. To get into the NICU, which was like, I mean, I didn't even ever think of any of this stuff. I had to call to make sure they were not working on him, to go see him, to get permission. Get in there, you have to wash your hands, of course, right away. You have to use this special, like, surgical hand sanitizer. They usually sanitize your phone because your phone is super dirty, and you are not allowed to use your phone. They discourage you from using your phone while you're holding your baby or touching your baby. You can take pictures, but then they ask that you, like, wash your hands right away after touching your phone before you touch your baby. So, and then you usually have to sign in saying, I don't have chickenpox, I haven't had a cough the last month, and a bunch of other questions, but usually you have to do that daily, sign in and just report your, like, symptoms or whatever. So then we left him, I think it was about 3 in the morning, to go, like, sleep, because I'd been up for, like, forever. And the next morning we called to make sure we could come see him. I can't remember, they might have been working on something, but we had to wait a little bit, but then we were able to go see him. Pretty much the whole time he was on the cooling blanket, we could just come, because it wasn't like he was really on any schedule. He just needed to get through this cooling. He couldn't eat. He pretty much just slept and shivered the whole time, unfortunately. He had a pacifier then because that was the only way, like, that was the only comfort he could have, because he couldn't eat. He couldn't cry or shiver a lot because that would warm him up, and then that would defeat the cooling process. He did have a couple doses of morphine while he was there to calm him down, but I think the most thing that he liked was me holding him. I would like touching him. He really liked it when I was like, I would rub right here and hold the pacifier for him and just talk to him, and I did praying for him and singing with him. That's all I could do. So that was until Friday night, Saturday morning. So Friday night he was done cooling, and he still had 12 hours to go to warm up. I think it took about 12 to 13 hours. And he was still in the cooling blanket, but they had to very gradually raise his temperature 0.5 degree every 2 hours. So he was cooling until 10:30 Friday night, I think, and then he went up degree to degree until he hit 37 degrees, which is, I don't know, whatever, 98.6 or whatever, on Saturday at noon. And we finally were able to take him off of most of his wires so that we could hold him, and I finally was able to nurse him for the first time. He did get some total nutrition, which is, I don't know, it's TPM, I don't know what the P is, because he was having sugar water and fluids, and you can't really have that for 3 days and be healthy. So he did get that, and he did get some lipids, which are fats. They didn't go in his stomach, they just went in his system. And then if he was really fussy, he got sweeties, which is the dextrose water. So Saturday, get there, hold him, etc. Then we leave to go eat, and this whole time, like, I'm battling between my son and my daughter now, like, where my attention is to both. It's really hard because when you have 2 kids, you have to think of both, because my daughter was not faring well with the NICU situation. She couldn't see her brother, she didn't understand why didn't he come home, she was acting out, all these things. So Saturday afternoon we came back, and this is when things started to change, because he was done cooling, so now he was just a baby in the NICU. Still had to be monitored, his labs, and make sure he was gaining and all this stuff. We get there, and of course I want to hold my baby, because I haven't held my baby since, you know, that first time, and I haven't held him 3 days prior to that. And so the nurse was acting like it was an inconvenience. So this is where it changed, where it might be like regular, nobody's like regular in the NICU, but like most babies are in incubators, etc. So my husband got like really defensive, like, oh, I'm sorry, this is an inconvenience for you to unhook the baby so we can hold him. And she just didn't have a good bedside manner to explain that when they're not cooling, when they're just like in the incubators, that they are on a schedule, because it's more not convenient, but it's easier for the nurses to care for them when they're on a schedule. It's safer, which is kind of like a double-edged sword, because I want them to be safe. I want them to take care of my baby safely, but I want to be able to like him to be on his own schedule like he would be at home. So pretty much he would sleep for 3 hours, 2-3 hours. He would get up. He would want to be held for about an hour, and then he'd get his diaper changed, get his vitals, and then go back to sleep for 3 hours. So if we came at a time when he was sleeping, it was not conducive to his getting better to hold him and disrupt his sleep and disrupt their schedule that they had set up for him. So that's when it changed. Once we understood that part, it was easier for us to be like, okay, so page me when he's ready to eat so we can come hold him. That way those 3 hours, 2-3 hours, I can go see my daughter. I can, take care of my other family needs. So I just had to get through that time, because I knew when we get home, he wasn't really going to be like that, and that it would be different. But we had to get through that portion so he could gain weight and be healthy and be discharged. So it worked for I think it was a day and a half or 2 days that he was on that. They'd page me, come in the middle of the night, come during the day. It's time for him to eat. And I'd just sit in a recliner and hold him and nurse him. And then when he was conked out, we'd put him back and he would go to sleep for a couple hours. I would just bring my milk whenever, and then I would just peek on him. I wouldn't really hold him. So if I pumped, I would just run the milk over, peek at him, give it to the nurse, and go back. It was nice to know that he was sleeping and warm and had a belly full, so that was great. So I don't know if he was the only term baby that was there, but there were tons of other preterm babies there. Some were in the full incubators, like the little huts where you had to gown up for some of them, and they were really, really tiny. And they had to be in their own little machine versus under a regular warming bed. But Abe was just in a regular warming bed. He did get bumped down from that eventually to just a bassinet that you would have in a regular mother-baby room. But slowly everything started to get taken off of him. His EEG came off the morning that he was warmed. His IV came out. His PICC line came out. So he was pretty much only on a couple of sensors, to monitor his respirations and his temperature, and I think his pulse. So just regular monitoring. And so when we had to hold him, they'd have to unhook at that, so we'd have 3 cords hanging off of him, but it wasn't a big deal at all. So when we were finally discharged from the NICU, he had an MRI to clear his brain to make sure there wasn't significant damage from being oxygen deprived. He did have 2 tiny little spots on his brain of dead tissue, which was probably from the oxygen deprivation, but there's also been studies of just normal people being MRI'd. Is that a word? Is that a verb? Being scanned, and they also have spots on their brains, and it doesn't affect their function or their development or anything. So who knows what will happen. We don't go off of those spots. We monitor his development and his behavior and see how it goes from there. So he had to have that be cleared. So we thought we were going to go home that day, which was Monday, but he had lost weight, and to be discharged from the NICU, you have to maintain your weight from the day before or gain. And so we had to stay another day, which was really hard because we had our hopes up. And then the next day, he maintained, I think, and they sent him to Mother Baby, which is where you normally go after you deliver. And he stayed there with us one night, and then he gained. And then we went home, thank God. So, another thing I forgot to mention in the NICU, they round on the babies. So they do that kind of in Mother Baby where the doctor just comes in, and says, everything looks good. But this is it's more involved in the NICU. They usually have it at a certain time. We were either paged, we were there ready for rounds to hear the plan for the day. And it was a team of 9 people, 7 to 9 people. The staff doctor, a resident, a nurse. He had to have respiratory care. He had to have the EEG person, med students, just a whole team of people for the NICU. So it was important for us to be there to listen to his rounds for his plans for the day. And I think that was the most important thing. The nurses, there are a lot of nurses. We went through a lot of nurses. We did have a couple the same a couple times, but mostly like it was several people. It wasn't really consistent of who had him. I think that's it. Oh, nobody could come in the NICU except for parents. We did have a priest come, which happened to be our priest, because he works at our church and he does the hospital. But he came and blessed our baby and prayed for him, which was nice. But otherwise, Flor could not come in. Grandma could not come in. We did finally make it to a day where he was well enough for us to wheel to a window so she could stand on the outside in the hallway, and he was still in the NICU and they could see each other through a plate of glass, which sounds so sad when it is. But I'll insert that picture. It was super sweet. She was so happy she finally got to see him and not just a picture. But otherwise, mom and dad, that was it. Everyone else who comes in has to like gown up and wear gloves, etc. The priest even, and I had a lactation consultant come and she had to gown up and all that stuff. So I'm pretty sure that's it. I'm trying to do this like relatively soon so I could remember all of it and help anyone who is facing a NICU stay. It's really hard to leave your baby, and just hope they get better and pray they get better. And I had a really relatively short stay compared to most people whose babies are in the NICU for months and months. So that's it. Let me know if you have questions. I hope I didn't forget anything. I think I touched on everything, but yeah. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.